Okay, welcome. This presentation today is an update on the progress of our study group as it pertains to the issues of mental health and substance use in Door County in order to influence public policy. If during our presentation you have questions, we would like you to save them for the end, and we will provide time then for questions, and we will try to answer them. In November 2017, a study group under the auspices of the League was organized to try to understand and learn about mental health and substance use. The group consists of local community members and League members interested in studying this topic. Some of the initial discussions included who are the people, the places and programs in Door County who work with these issues every day, and what questions should we ask at the interviews with people in the county. Our initial agenda included key questions, finalize an objective and defined goal of the study group, gather a list of people to interview, write a list of questions to ask during an interview, and determine the plan for the interview. The objective and the goal of the group was tweaked several times, and the final wording ended as, the objective was, how does our community address substance use in relation to our criminal justice system, mental health system, and informal family support systems? And our goal was to understand how our community addresses the mental health and substance use in relation to our criminal justice system, mental health system, and informal support systems in order to influence public policy. We put together a list of people and organizations we felt would teach us and give us the information we needed to arrive at the conclusions. And we asked each group we interacted with the same questions. And they were, can you give us an overview, of the various ways someone can come into the system because of mental health or substance use issues, or a combination of both. Number 2 was to identify and follow each person through the various things that can happen to them in the system from start to finish, and a virtual flow chart of their interactions in the systems. And if you had a magic wand and unlimited resources, what would you do? We took our interviews, took place throughout 2018, and these are the groups that we interacted with. Pretty much the whole committee attended, so, but that's who we all interacted in the dates that we met with each one. So now members of our group will give the findings of what we have learned so far.
Before we get started with that, I'd like to discuss some statistics. The first statistics are going to be national statistics. And as you can see, 1 out of every 5 adults in the U.S., approximately 43.8 million, experience mental illness in 1 year. Approximately 1 out of 25 experience a serious mental illness in our nation. The consequences for that, as you can see, 26% are homeless that deal with mental illness. An estimated of 46% live with severe mental illness or substance use disorder. Approximately 20% are in state prisons, 21 are in local jails or prisons. And recent history will show that there has not been really much change in this since 2009. For the state of Wisconsin, for major depressive disorder, you're looking at 13.64 from the ages of 12 to 17, and from 18 to 25, 10.61%. Wisconsin is pretty much with the levels of the national rates. However, from 18 to 25 with mental illness, 22.42, it's slightly higher than your average rate nationally. Individuals with substance use disorder have a very high prevalence rate for any mental illness. It's approximately 192,000 in Wisconsin suffer from mental illness. The consequences of that, our county jails are housing these individuals. 64.2%, that's where they are. Or in corrections, 56.2%. And 45% of them are homeless. So there is a need for this to be addressed. Our jails or correction facilities are not the areas that these individuals should be in. Why we decided to do our study. A little bit closer to home, the time of this study, the residents were about 27,000. So as you can see, a little over 4,000 of those 27,000 deal with a mental illness. 919 deal with a serious mental illness right here in Door County. So as you continue to listen to our presentation, you will see why we decided to focus on the topics that we focused on. As we were interviewing the different organizations, we noticed that these were the points of entry into each organization that we interviewed. You got self-referral, 911, excuse me for a second, I have to go to my cheat sheet. So self-referrals are somebody willingly going in for substance abuse help or mental illness, 911 calls, wellness checks, but that's when your neighbor or family member is concerned about the individual, so they'll call the police and have them go check on the individual. Criminal activity, which is burglary, illegal entry, assault, an auto accident, self-harm or suicide attempt will also draw law enforcement or family members, drinking under the influence, substance use, and court order. So these respective areas, you'll hear each one of us will talk about how those areas, people enter our respected areas through those areas. During my research, I noticed for the whole state of Wisconsin, as you can see, law enforcement and self-referrals are quite high. And for this report, law enforcement does include the 911 calls, the wellness checks, DWIs. So the moral of the story is that law enforcement oftentimes is the first point of contact for these individuals. Now, these are the organizations, again, that we interviewed. And as we go through the presentation, we'll each talk about one of those areas. So Help of Door County is an organization that's been around since 1979. Help provides services for anybody that comes in through the door. They don't discriminate regardless of the reason. You come in their door, they will be willing to help, sit down and talk to you. They're advocates for all members of the community. Men do ask for help. Help is known for domestic violence, but men do walk in the door. They are abused as well. Women, 82% of the women that come in to Door County. They also handle situations with elder abuse. There is a whole department that will take care of the elder abuse calls. And that is also, they also recently worked with law enforcement. The individual that deals with elder abuse went to Washington and got a training on how to help police officers handle elder abuse, because that is a little bit different than your average call. They help individuals fill out restraining orders. That could be a little bit tedious, so they'll sit down with somebody and do a restraining order. Child exchange program, that's when the parents of the child, they don't want to see each other, or they can't be next to one another, so the child will get dropped off at one end of the building and the person who's picking up the child will be at the other end of the building, so they won't even see each other. So the child gets exchanged through one of the advocates at HELP. The child supervision program, that's if one of the parents needs to be supervised while they're visiting with their child. They have a room, it's a beautiful room, there's a living room, and there's a little kitchen, so whoever's visiting with the child could cook something with them. They can make brownies or cookie. It's well set up, and that's supervised. Somebody is in the room with them, and then there's 2 individuals outside the room watching a TV screen. So they provide safe homes, so if there's a victim that comes in and she needs or he needs to leave immediately, they're not safe in their home, they will provide living arrangements for 2 to 3 days until a more permanent living arrangement is provided. They do have a transitional living program, and that is to help the person who needs to leave the abusive environment afford a place on their own. So how the program works is the individual has to come with the first month's rent or the security, and then help will pay the first month's rent. The second month they'll pay 75% of the rent, the third month 50%, and on the fourth month 25%. And while this is happening, the individual is going through counseling, they're going through a group, they're helping manage money and the whole 9 yards to help the person be more independent. They do groups in jail and out of jail with women who have experienced domestic violence. They do a lot of advocacy work in the county to make people aware of the power and control and the cycle of abuse that happens. They do this in all the schools in Door County, and the Boys and Girls Club, and other organizations that will allow them a platform to talk about the power and control and the cycle of abuse. And this is to empower and encourage change in women and men's lives so they can get rid of that stigma of domestic violence and understand that getting out of that environment will be better for them.
Could I make a comment about the groups?
Sure.
You mentioned the groups for women who are abused, but they also have groups for those who are the abusers.
Yes, that's in jail. Yeah, they do that in the jail.
Well, they have had groups outside of jail and in jail, because not
Okay.
everyone who's an abuser ends up in jail. Many do.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
All right, and then I am going to transition this over to the Sheriff's Department, which is Susie.
Okay, this is really a very quick snapshot of a lot of the programs. But to give you a snapshot of our jail, we have 143 beds in the jail. They're not all full. If you have an interest in watching this progress over time, and you go to the county website, the Public Safety Committee, every month there will be the paperwork that I'm using today, which is of March, but you will be able to see, how many beds are filled and how many people have AODA contacts with groups within the jail, and all of these different statistics that I'll give you from time to time are in that packet every single month. So even though we have 143 beds, in March the average daily head count was 93. Okay, 81% of that was male, 11%, these are averages, were female. 24 of them were Huber inmates, meaning they are able to leave to go to employment and possibly schooling, I think, as well. And our jail, because it has more beds than we traditionally have been filling, we are able to earn a little of money by allowing other counties who don't have enough beds to send inmates to us. In the month of March, we had an average of 4 from Kewanee, 1 from Manitowoc, and then the state Department of Corrections also asks us from time to time to take in inmates that have been sanctioned from, and they're mostly from communities around us, like Brown County, which is full, and Kewanee County, Ozark, Outagamie County, and some of the nearby. And we had an average of 20 per day from the Department of Corrections. Okay, so within the jail, I'm going to go out of order here. So first of all, these are our points of entry, okay? And all of those things get you in contact with the criminal justice system, with the possible exception of self-referral. Suppose that's possible, but I don't know. You can judge whether that would happen or not. So down here we have a couple programs I want to talk about first. So this is a pre-sentence release, pre-booking release and monitoring program, and what that is for, it's fairly recent. When Tammy was sheriff, she was able to get a grant to start this, and it essentially means that when someone is arrested and booked, they are screened to see if they would be a good risk to be out of the jail and be able to be monitored, possibly tested for alcohol and drugs frequently, maybe even electronic monitoring. But the main point is keep them in the community, allow them to go to work, take care of their families while they're waiting for their day in court. The Pathway Diversion Program is another one that when someone comes in that has a mental health issue or an abuse of drugs or alcohol issue, if they have to be screened, obviously, and they only get this one chance to use this particular program, but if they're willing to go into treatment and meet their treatment goals, they can avoid having a record. I mean, the record is not even recorded. If they, don't meet their goals and relapse or whatever it is, then they go right back into the system and go through the court as they would. Okay, and then these are for people who have been sentenced and are in the jail. And we'll look at this one first. Operation Fresh Start is relatively new as well. And the whole goal of Operation Fresh Start is so that when you leave the jail, you're not going to have to come back. We're going to deal with recidivism and make it less than it has been. And they do that. It's voluntary. They're screened. If they choose to be a part of it, then they work on modules that are designed to help them do better when they get out. So there's a financial model, help them learn how to budget and manage their checkbook and so on. There's an educational piece. If they don't have a high school diploma, they can work on GED, HSED. There's a parenting one, a relationships piece, what am I forgetting? A jobs piece to help them deal with career advancement or even just to get a job in the first place. And as they complete modules, they can get days off their sentences as well. And so statistics for that one for March. I read in the annual report for the jail last year, 2 people completed all 7 modules of that. And then this year, since January, 7 have entered the program. There were 3 of them that were not eligible, and one of the things is you have to be a Door County resident, you have to be going to be in the jail for 60 days at least. So right now there are 10 active participants. Their interactions with the participants by the coordinator of this program, which is a full-time person that is paid for by the grant but will be picked up by the county or partially paid by the county if needed at some point. 376 interactions. They got 82 days off their sentences during those 3 months. Had 118 human services interactions. Did you put up a sign for me? Thank you. 59 community resource interactions, and one of those people has already completed the program. So it's very encouraging. All right, these other things are pretty much what they sound like. And there's individual mental health counseling with the coordinator of Operation Fresh Start. You see the AODA group, Alcoholics Anonymous. We talked about this a little bit. Healthy relationships class. There's another similar one called Building Strong Families. Job Center and We Are Hope work on job and employment. There are religious programs. Centering Breath Help does this one, and I'm forgetting what the other one is that Help does. Well, they do the meditation and so on, and they do the healthy relationship classes, I think. Okay, and in addition to that, there's an inmate worker program where they can get time off their sentence by doing work within the jail, and a thing called Journaling Poets to explore the value of self-discovery through writing. Okay, public health. This is where Dakota can correct me if I get this stuff wrong. Okay, so again, we looked at public health not because somebody gets referred and plopped there in the dealing with public health, but all of these are programs that support the person themselves or their families or their spouses. And it offers more services to help that family cope or those folks cope. And some of them deal directly with the substance use that we talked about in the mental health, which are our two concerns that we started looking for. So anyway, so these are programs that come out of the public health department. So anyway, so as a result, it's self-referral that gets you in there. Prenatal care, we have, in the last year, this was in the annual report, 364 visits by nurses to homes or with clients to help young mothers have healthy children and care for them and visit their homes. And as one of the nurses said, we kind of take them by the hand and we walk them through as best we can to get what they need. Of course, you're probably familiar with women, infants, children, but again, supplemental food program that you have to qualify for financially. At the immunizations and assisting the schools with student health issues. Often the children of people who are in the jail have all kinds of issues. So again, just as a support. These are collaborations in the sense that they work with other people. The question, persuade, refer, QPR is a suicide prevention program, and that comes out of the health department. There are 2 nurses that go around and have trained within the last month 55 individuals. There is a flyer over there if you are interested in learning more about that. They will train anybody, and there's a training on May 1st. This just came out today. So if you have an interest and you might like to be trained or have your group that you're a part of trained, get a hold of the health department. The more people that understand how to help those that are struggling cope, the better. Door County Partnership for Children and Families came out of a 2016 community needs assessment that the health department does to see what should we be working on. And again, it's many groups, agencies, nonprofits that work together to deal with child readiness, problem solving that kids do, family relationships, parenting. There are some brochures over there on that as well. Mental health focus group, again, it's a collaboration of a group of agencies, and that one came out of a 2012 community needs assessment that showed that Door County has some issues in this area. And so they started putting this group together to figure out how can we handle this. And then the Door County Cradle to Career, another coalition. This comes out of Lakeshore CAP though, but its goal is to connect pregnant individuals and parents of young children, again with a supportive network of resources of all of the agencies, all of the nonprofits, whoever can help them. What can we do to help folks cope at times that are difficult? And a lot of these deal with the population that are struggling with mental health or substance use. And I'm finished.
Oh, Door County Department of Health and Human Services, which is a very large department. And since we interviewed public health, they've formally been incorporated into human services, so hence Health and Human Services. Their mission statement is the primary mission of the Health and Human Services Department is to enhance the human well-being throughout an individual's lifespan and to help meet the needs of individuals and families while promoting safety and self-sufficiency that demonstrate respect and dignity. So they try to do as much prevention as they can, but they also are the mandated department that needs to receive clients in that this is often the only place that they can be served. They will accept people who have insurance, etc., but usually people with insurance, if they're looking for treatment, will go they have options, they can go to other places. Particularly substance abuse, frequently lose your job, lose your insurance, lose your savings, lose your family. You end up coming to the county as your treatment source of last resource. So the department does not refer people into the criminal justice system as its own entity, but does receive people either through the courts, before jail, after jail. They provide services during jail, after prison, etc. So they work in tandem with probably every other agency that we've talked about here. Alcohol is the #1 drug of choice in this area, but often other drugs are used with alcohol or multiple drugs used together. The department really places a priority on prevention with persons who have mental health problems. The department supports Jack's Place as a safe place and promotes programming to encourage involvement, education, and socialization. The real feeling here is if you can have a person surrounded with services and with support, if there's a crisis, and for all of us, it could be a death in the family, it could be something that happens, a health crisis, and most people that I know really have a difficult time dealing when those things happen. If you have maybe an underlying chemical use problem, if you have an underlying mental health problem, it really exacerbates what's happening, and it's more difficult for this person to cope. So it really is important to have a support system. And like anybody else, many of us have a hard time asking for help. So if there are people around you who can assess kind of what's going on, that intervention can happen faster. So a place like Jack's Place is very, very important. So back to alcohol, if a lot of people would get picked up for an LWI or DUI, or some other an accident or something that happens when using, and the county Human Services also provides the contracts to do the driver assessment training. That's done, and then there's a driver safety plan. Some people choose to have their driver safety treatment plan done with the county, others not. But then that person is also interacting with the DA, interacting with the public defender, interacting with the judicial system, victim impact, so it is all really very intertwined. Frequently, people who do have mental health problems often also have some chemical use problems, whether it's abuse or it's just use. So frequently, one of the things that is happening more and more often is to recognize and try to sort some of this out when people say are in jail, because you just can't assume that they don't have any issues, which I think was the case 10 years ago. I think people are getting a little more sophisticated nowadays, and trying to, with some of the new programs that are trying to actually start some treatment when they're in jail, or referrals after they're in jail. The other thing that's becoming more and more common now is trauma-informed care, which is to take a look at incidents that have happened in a person's life. And you can't say that a divorce is necessarily something that's going to cause an effect later on in your life. But for some people, it could be a divorce. It could be the death of a parent at an early age. So by looking at mental health, substance use, and also trauma in their younger years, you can really take a look at helping people. And anyone who wants any trauma-informed care, there is a lot of work that's happening in that, and there are Monday lunch and learns every month, so they're really trying to get that message out. The other thing that the Human Services works with is adolescents, children, adolescents, juveniles, and there are children who are 6 years old. There are children who are 6 years old who are truant, who are expelled from school. A lot of that isn't because of the child, it might be because of the parents. There are adolescents, there are fewer and fewer treatment options for teenagers in Green Bay and Brown County and anywhere. We're currently sending kids to Wausau for jail. And then the whole Lincoln Hills, Dewey Hall thing is up in the air. So Health and Human Services has started a program called, what is it called? The Youth Connection Center, which is in the old JC's building, part of the building. And there are 5 kids, I believe, in the county, one from Gibraltar, one from Southern Door, the rest of them are from Sturgeon Bay. They go there from like 1 to 7, kind of into that troublesome evening hours. And they get some help with schoolwork, and they get some help with life skills, some exercise, different types of things. And so that's just started. Hopefully that will expand a little bit. And also, we're working with Judge Weber and setting up the treatment court, which you'll be hearing more about, and there'll be actually treatment court training happening on the national level. Was coming here to train in the end of April. So the main areas of Health and Human Services are behavioral health, which includes substance use, mental health, driver safety plan, outpatient, group, individual treatment, crisis intervention. They contracts with family services to provide the telephone crisis intervention that was probably talked about in law enforcement, and that's often the first contact in a crisis. They also have a in-house crisis team that works basically 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. And they have in juvenile justice and child protection, they are the social workers that work with kids. And they have the community support program, which Seth will talk about.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
What are the ages of the kids in that new program at JC's?
I think teenagers.
Teenagers,
I think
okay.
high school kids.
All right, thanks.
Well, as Helen said, my assignment for this committee was with a community support program, which is part of the Door County Department of Human Services. It made sense for me to take this assignment because I'm employed as a certified peer specialist, and I work with community support program clients. It is the mission of the community support program of the Department of Human Services to provide comprehensive support services to consumers living with severe and persistent mental illness. This is, I'll just finish with the mission statement and I'll elaborate. This is achieved by providing every manner of service, both traditional and non-traditional formats, which are deemed necessary to support and maintain independent, community-based living among identified consumers. The community support program, I believe, came around, the idea for that service came about in the early 80s, possibly a little bit further back than that. The idea was that you would take people out of the mental health institutions, the secure facilities, and you would integrate them back into society, give them all the tools they need to make it on the outside. So that's what I do with community support programs is just that. It's getting people the services they need in the community instead of being behind bars or something worse. Individuals come to CSP due to multiple crisis contexts and or recurrent psychiatric hospitalization due to medication non-compliance. By the time people arrive at CSP, they've already typically received mental health services. CSP is very intense, more intensive. Just trying to get the people that I work with have already shown that they are not at the level where that they can just do everything themselves. They need help getting to appointments, they need help getting to everything that they need to get to. Most common issue that brings an individual to CSP services is a severe thought disorder. Thought disorder typically it means schizophrenia or something that has an illness, diagnosis that includes some kind of psychosis. And that usually leads to disorganization in the community. Often an individual comes to CSP after having become homeless and or losing benefits. And some of those benefits are supplemental security income, Social Security, disability, insurance, Medicare, and Medicaid. Medicaid is would be our local version is called Badger Care. Currently, CSP provides services for 53 individuals ranging from 18 to 76 years old. So it's across the board. We have more. We're seeing that we have more people that are aging out of CSP, and we're not getting as many young people in. Is that good or is it bad? It's just a fact. Individuals are usually enrolled in CSP until they require a nursing home placement or qualify for family care. Family care is another service that's available to people with mental illness after they've been deemed frail or elderly. Now, that makes it sound like CSP is the last stop there, and it isn't, I'll tell you that much. A lot of people who are in CSP end up staying in CSP for a long time until they're moved into an assisted facility. But as Cheryl Flores, my boss, whom I interviewed for this, she said that they may improve, a person in CSP may improve to the point that the Comprehensive Community Services Program is a better fit for them. Comprehensive Community Services is what we describe as a CSP light. It's for people who have, proven that they are at a higher level, that they don't quite need as much of the intense coaching and this and that. So comprehensive community services is also a possibility. Or the person may get to a point where they just see a psychiatrist and they just see a counselor. They'll see the county psychiatrist for medications and then a counselor more often than not. Let's see here. The next thing was the fact that only 7 out of the 53 individuals served by CSP have AODA issues. That is not something I personally do much of. CSP does facilitate an AODA group that meets weekly. Next question for Cheryl was had to do with cannabis and the cannabis use for individuals with thought disorders will often lead to an increase in hallucinations and paranoia. It's important, and this is something that I found out since then, it's important to consider the different strains of cannabis. We'll call it cannabis, it's marijuana, whatever. Some may help, some may hurt. For this reason, medical cannabis is much more likely to have the support of mental health professionals. The feeling is that total legalization of the plant would almost certainly lead to more diagnosis of thought disorders, especially in young people. Young people who ingest too much THC exhibit symptoms of mental illness. Whether or not that lasts or not is a case by case. But you're not. It's a hard sell to the mental health workers because of their experience with people who overdo it on cannabis. So there's more support for the legalization medical. Like if you need to go, you see the doctor says this. The problem is that with young people there's a lot of self-control issues anyway. Finally, the magic wand question, and this one I kind of hear over and over again. What would CSP what would my boss like to see? What if she could make something happen in our community? And that is first and foremost, Door County needs a diversion facility staffed by crisis-trained staff to prevent hospitalization. This would be a transitional living arrangement and allow citizens and clients to stabilize and reintegrate into society. What we could really use here in Sturgeon Bay and in the county is a diversion facility, somewhere for people who have recently been hospitalized, recently been incarcerated. It would be really great to have a space for them to stay, for a temporary living situation where they get out of the hospital, they get onto their meds, they see their counselor, but they're not kind of just pushed out into the community. So that would be her magic wand question. I think I'm done.
Okay, I will tell you a little bit about our visit to the hospital, to the Door County emergency room. We met with Sandy Vandertye, who's the Director of Outpatient Services, and we met also with Barbara Johnson-Giese, who is the Director of Behavioral Health there. Point of entry to the ER, as you might imagine, comes from any number of sources. Certainly self-referral, many calls that are initiated through 911 will lead a person or persons to the ER, whether it's around suicide or self-harm problems, DUI, people who are picked up go to the emergency room, substance use crises end up in the emergency room. But the only thing you probably wouldn't find would be the court order. I mean, even a wellness check, it all depends. That's kind of the generic answer to where do the people come from. It all depends. In terms of our meeting with Sandy in the ER, and as they relate to mental health issues and substance use issues, the ER depends on Door County Health and Human Services crisis team that has persons assigned to be on call, to be called to the emergency room as needed to help assess especially risk of harm to self or others, which would then lead to decisions that need to be made around being able to be discharged or needing to be hospitalized. Now, this is separate from the ER's role in terms of assessing medical stability. And a person needs to be medically cleared as well once that person enters the ER before either being hospitalized or being discharged. Now, the rub in Door County is that we don't have any inpatient facilities that are equipped to handle mental health problems, psychiatric, hospitalization types of things, or detox situations either. And so we need to depend on primarily Door County. Bellin has an inpatient unit, Brown County has an inpatient unit. There is a counseling service called Willow Creek that I believe has inpatient and also can provide detox facilities. Now, Will County, I believe, is insurance-based. And I have to say, I don't have the details on that. So, that creates always a challenge. And when someone needs to be hospitalized and needs to be transported out of Door County and needs to be handled. So Human Services works at finding a place, and law enforcement, if is not involved already, gets involved in terms of needing to transport.
One of the interesting things that Sandy told us was that, you know, ERs need to comply with HIPAA, the confidentiality regulations, just like any other place does. And unless there is a crime associated with the person coming into the ER visit, the ER does not report to law enforcement about that person's behavior unless there's a crime involved. And I found that to be sort of obvious, but also something I hadn't quite considered myself. The magic wand question, we didn't spend a whole lot of time on, but just briefly, Sandy just wishes that there was more funding for the Health and Human Services. There are just not enough resources, not enough people, not enough places. And this leaves the emergency room, as you might guess, with their hands tied, feeling like their hands are tied behind their back all too often. We enjoyed talking with Barbara Johnson-Giese, though, you know, for some of us, we were not actually aware that the medical center now offers behavioral health services. It's not very many years old. And these outpatient services are not unlike the other counseling services in Door County. And for them, it's self-referral and referral from doctors, and those usual sources are referral into that, what they have to offer. And those services are around the general counseling and therapy to individuals, couples, and families.
Can I ask a question
Yes.
about that?
Yes.
How large a staff do they have at this point? Do you
They
know?
have three
people?
counselors. Three counselors, if I have that right, what I think I do.
And do they accept Medicaid?
Yes.
Thank you.
And are any among them specialized in working with children?
There.
No. That's always hard to find.
12 and up.
12 and up,
That's right.
okay.
That's right.
Well,
Thank you.
families are important for the youngest kids, but still.
And they are
Thanks.
involved in some school outreach programs. But you're right, finding counseling and therapy for children is always a tough one.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. Oh, I'll start it? Okay, I'll stay here then. And Sandy and I are going to share this. The group met with our judges, Ehlers and Weber, in January. And we kind of asked them the same questions. How does someone come into the system that you are in? And of course, it's pretty obvious that a lot of the entry points don't directly apply here until there are criminal charges. So that's the point of entry to that part of the justice system and the circuit court. You know, law enforcement is involved, the case goes to the DA determines what charges, if any, are going to be filed, and at that point, the person moves through the system into the criminal justice system. Now, there are other circumstances where mental health related circumstances where the system, the circuit court system gets involved. And these are around mental health crisis calls where there needs to be a commitment, a hospitalization, and the person is not willing to go voluntarily, and there needs to then be an involuntary commitment. This will require a hearing and a judgment by the judges. And there are very strict protocols placed around the time limits time limits around making these assessments once a person is involuntarily committed. I mean, the idea is you always want to strive for the least restrictive environment in any given situation. And so there's a 72-hour limit in terms of having 2 medical doctors make assessments around the person's need to be hospitalized. There's a 14-day limit around making some sort of final commitment via a hearing. Sometimes it's a video hearing with the judges. So there's that element also. The judges told us that the vast majority of cases that come before them involve drug use or abuse, alcohol use or abuse, and a co-occurring mental health problem. And they talk to us about the tools that they have to use at their disposal. They have incarceration. That's an obvious, a jail sentence, a prison sentence. They told us that their preferred default is to use probation. And that, I guess that all depends too, but I know they mentioned anywhere from 12 to 18 months of probation. And this is always made with certain conditions around, you know, attending school or finding and keeping a job, attending counseling, community service, you know, not drinking, not using, those kinds of conditions that need to be complied with. And then the judges reminded us that some persons will fail miserably with probation, and they're unable to comply with what's required of them. And the rub for the judges is that once that probation has been revoked, pretty much at this point in time, the only recourse the judge has is to send him back to jail, which we all pretty much can agree is probably not a very substantial or positive solution.
Do they have to go to jail to serve the whole sentence that would have been imposed, or do they send them to jail kind of as, you know, you go to jail for 2 weeks and then try again, or how does that work?
We didn't ask about that, so I have to say I don't know the details on that. All I know is that the judges don't like to have to do that.
I know often when people are revoked, they've possibly committed another, what's considered another crime, like they call it bail jumping if they don't show up to an appointment.
Right.
And so then they're facing further charges.
Well, there's probably a long list of what constitutes breaking probation. So the judge's point in this part of our interview was that they really are very interested in creating another tool, which is to bring treatment court to Door County. So I'm going to turn this over to Sandy, who will tell us more about what they had to tell us about treatment court.
The population for the treatment court are people who are high risk, high need. That means that they're high risk to reoffend in terms of their criminal behavior, and that they may have an addiction or mental health problem or both, and those are people that don't do well on probation. A treatment court is designed to give those people intensive oversight while on probation. All people on probation have some sort of supervision, but the treatment court is very structured, court-run supervision that runs concurrently with the traditional probation. There are different phases people in the treatment court go through, but initially the person has to meet with the judge once a week and have continual contact with the treatment court coordinator and take UAs and maintain employment and receive treatment and counseling. So the participants in the treatment courts are continually evaluated by the committee, and there is more or less daily supervision. This heightened supervision, the research suggests, is what is needed to break the cycle that most of these people are in. One can get into the treatment court in a variety of ways. It can happen at the beginning of the criminal case if the DA and PD feel that the person is a good fit. It could also happen as an alternative to revocation on the recommendation of the agent. Please note that the treatment court is not a diversion program, as was mentioned earlier, meaning that criminal charges are not dropped or reduced. In fact, at some point, all persons who have pled guilty or no contest to the criminal charge. So that's how it's different than those diversion programs. It is a post-conviction program, although some participants may be in the program before they actually plead to the charge. Only people who truly want to participate will be allowed to do so, and no violent persons, sex offenders, major drug dealers, or criminals who are not at high risk and high need will be involved in this program. The judges are really exploring grants, and the whole committee, and are hopeful that the county board as well will support these efforts with some grant money. They are confident that the cost savings in the treatment court will justify its expense to the county. Yeah.
Could you tell me one more time, who is it that people in the program need to meet with weekly?
Yes, let's see. They meet with the judge once a week. They have continual contact with the treatment court coordinator. And
Okay.
that's a position that we don't have right
Okay.
now that would need to be, that's part of the magic wand that they'd like to see.
Thank you for
Can I
sharing
add?
that again.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
The person who's hired as the Operation Fresh Start is a full-time person. And I think they told us that that person could do some of this to save on some of the costs, and that grants could pick up more, and hopefully if grants petered out, the county would pay for that person. That's, the position is the issue.
Okay.
And part of that team that meets weekly includes their employer, and they would like the employer, that person to have that job at the first meeting. And so there's a whole team of people that meets weekly the first year, and then every other week the second year, and it kind of tapers off after that. But it's the DA, the judge, and the employer, and
Basically all the
Christensen.
people that
Yeah,
that person
Chelsea
is.
Christensen is the person, and then often there would be their recovery team, so if they have a sponsor or a counselor, and they also would be part of that team.
It sounded to me like a lot of judge time.
Yes.
It is.
Hence, they must feel really strongly about this, and that's exciting.
Well, and I think they feel that if the person is coming weekly before the judge, then they have a stronger position to enforce the
Yes.
prohibition. The other item that the judges are very interested in is a sober house for Door County, or that transitional living that might serve as both positions for mental health and for ODA. The drug court, Judge Weber is really promoting this, and he spoke to the county board, so you can see that on tape. Also, at Stone Harbor, somebody else mentioned that there'll be a training Wednesday, April 24th through Friday, April 26th from the national group. And so Judge Weber invited people that might be interested to contact him, because you wouldn't necessarily have to register for the whole conference, all 3 days, but you could sit in at some of those. And we have a schedule here if you'd like to look at that and maybe consider, but I think letting him know ahead of time would be good that you want to participate. So that's what we have for the judges. And the last area that...
Could I add one more thing about the treatment court? You heard me say that the jail beds, being able to bring in extra people from the Department of Corrections, whatever, earn some money. And they're hoping to use that money, and have been using that money, to leverage things like a little bit of it towards perhaps the school, resource officers if they need a little extra, use some of it for this, the treatment court, and some of these other projects that you need to find some other dollars. And so that's one place to look for some of it.
Right.
Not lots of it, but some.
The last area is the public defender, and I just had a conversation with him, so, public defenders are, there's an office in Green Bay. They can be appointed by a court, or if a person doesn't have means to defend themselves, then they can request a public defender. Those public defenders are certified in different areas. So the office in Green Bay will call when they have a need for someone who they know is certified in that area. The person I talked to does a lot of drunk driving offenses, so I got a lot of information about that. I think it's interesting to me that the first DUI in Wisconsin is basically just a fine unless there's criminal activity associated with it or property damage. And the second DUI does require an impact panel, and those are events that happen that others can attend as well to learn more about that, but would be required for a second DUI. And then a fourth DUI is a lifetime loss of a license, so it's amazing when we see in the paper that someone has a seventh offense, how they get that far. But certainly indicates that we have a problem in the world. For difficulties, the blood test does take 2 weeks, so if it's greater than 0.08, they lose their license for 6 months. Interesting that cannabis and other drugs stay in your system much longer than alcohol, and any amount of a drug or controlled substance can be enough to get you arrested or charged with driving under the influence. And that includes prescription drugs. So as we talk about legalizing marijuana, we have to think about the repercussions of that elsewhere too. Court dates take 3 to 4 weeks, so that's really time consuming. And there is a lack of public defenders. The local guy gets calls from the North Woods trying to find public defenders. And part of that is because the pay is low. It was just increased to $100 for court-appointed defenders. It's only $70 for others. And can also take 5 to 6 months to get paid, so there's probably not a lot of lawyers out there that want to do that work either. So those are some of the difficulties. Thank you.
So, as you've heard from everyone, these issues are complicated, they're intertwined. Our group still wants to conduct more interviews and before we come to any conclusions, and we will report back with these conclusions and ways we as an organization can influence public policy. So if you have any